Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and we've got a big balance update for Dota Underlords. Now, the meta in Dota Underlords has been a little bit stagnant since the big update about 2 weeks ago. Most players were playing Anessix as the preferred Underlord of choice, and then pairing it up with some variant of a Warriors build. 3 Warriors, 6 Warriors, and then you pair it with Hunters, or with Arc Warden, or with Trolls, or with Savages, or something, but you always formed around this Warrior core with Anessix and her healing. Both of those aspects got substantially hit in this balance patch, so let's hop right into it. First, some general changes, some optimizations, some bug fixes. Not going to go into too much detail here, but there's definitely some improvements that people were asking, people saying, hey, this looks like a bug, this isn't working properly, especially on mobile, and other UI fixes. So always good to see that. Always happy to see that they're listening to the feedback and adjusting them as they go. So in terms of actual gameplay, fire is now lethal if the applier is an enemy. So the fire debuff comes from Hobgen primarily. His auto attacks set opponents on fire, and supercharge sets your own units on fire, and also Lena with her ability sets units on fire as well. Previously, it would say it would deal a percentage of their health every second, and then they would not be killed by it. It would be not fatal debuff. It would just drop them down to 1 health. Then they die if anything looks at them funny, but sometimes, you just wouldn't actually get that final killing blow, and the unit would stick around at 1 health for a long time. Now, fire will be lethal. If they're on fire and they're low health, they will be killed. That's awesome. Big buff to Hobgen, who is the less played Underlord for sure. They also fixed a bug where Knights would not get their bonus magical damage reduction when standing next to friendly Knights, and this is one part of what made Knights feel so terribly bad in this patch. It just felt way too squishy, especially against magic damage compositions. You'd have 4 or 6 Knights, and they just get blown up by an opposing magic damage burst, and you'd be left wondering, like, what the heck? I'm supposed to have 50% damage reduction. Well, you were really only getting half of that bonus, specifically for magic damage. So great buff to Knights by way of bug fix. Also, a big buff to a lot of compositions. Break no longer affects alliances. Now, break is kind of a new wording, new mechanic they added in the big update, and it previously said it would disable all alliances and passive effects. So if you have somebody like Drow Ranger and her passive Precision Aura, you had Slark and his passive Essence Steal, or you had another passive type effect like Anti-Mage's Mana Burn, those would all be affected by break, and they would also lose any alliance bonuses, like say the bonus armor from a warrior or the damage reduction from being a knight. That's no longer the case. It'll still stop the passives. It'll stop those Drow Ranger, Slark, Anti-Mage type effects, but it won't affect your alliances anymore. So that's a huge buff to builds that really rely on that alliance. Things like Scrappy, that wants the bonus armor and wants the health regen. Knights who need their front line to be tanky. Previously, Anessix just had way too many sources of break, and it would just completely shut down anything you're trying to do if you didn't have a very sturdy front line. Okay, so on to the actual changes. Anessix, her Martyr's Boon, that's her big AoE heal effect. It no longer has a burst heal component, and instead it heals over time. And the heal per second has changed from 5 up to 10 per Underlord level. So previously she would do like a big chunk of, I believe it was, like if she was level 5, she would deal 50 healing per. So if she was level 5, she would deal 250 heal, and then another 50 per second over time. I think that's right. Might be wrong on that math, or maybe it was 25 per second over time. So it's like 5 times the level, or 10 times the level of the initial heal. So this is actually a net nerf. It'll do a lot less healing over its duration. I haven't actually run the math, and I'm live recording, so I'm not going to do the math, but I'm sure you can work it out real quick. But I'm almost positive it'll be a decrease in overall healing, and it won't become in one big burst. It'll come in a slow, steady heal over time, even though it will be a little bit higher. The duration has changed from 5 seconds up to 8 seconds. That was the initial duration that it had right at the big update launch, but that was proved to be too powerful, so they dropped it down to 5, but that was not nearly enough of a nerf, so they've done this. Okay, Rejuvenating Ritual, a new talent that basically says Martyr's Boon now delivers the first 50% of its heal immediately and then the rest over the duration of the spell. This does not actually seem like it increases your healing at all. It just front loads it, which doesn't really seem worthwhile. Arcane Ritual was probably not the least picked one in that tier, but essentially that was used for any kind of mage build or anybody who wanted mana, so you won't be able to gain bonus mana with Anessix anymore. But this new talent does not seem like a very good replacement. Not strategically, it doesn't. I mean, I get thematically, it makes sense that, oh, we took away her initial burst heal, but then this doesn't actually sound like it increases the healing output. I could be wrong. It could be worded a little bit misleadingly here, but I would probably try to avoid this talent if possible. Instant Regret, the duration is changed from infinite down to 5 seconds. So that probably had to come out because of the increased effective Martyr's Boon, the longer duration. That Instant Regret, which is it breaks the target who kills somebody under effective Martyr's Boon, is now just a 5-second break instead of an infinitely long break. So lots of good nerfs to Anessix. She was by far the most popular, and we'll have to see if that, coupled with the buff to Hobgen, will be enough to offset it. We saw the buff to Hobgen's Fire, and I believe there's another Hobgen buff down here. Yeah. I'll just do this because they're kind of in the same section. Hobgen, his Explosivo, the animation length changed from 4 seconds down to 2.4, and that is one of my biggest proposals in terms of fixing Hobgen. Was his cast animations are just way too long. So to see this cut almost in half is great. That's exactly what he needed to see. Let's Go Crazy, his ultimate, now cast at 100 hype instead of at 85 instead of 100, and it also silences Hobgen, so he no longer is going to cast Let's Go Crazy and then spend 4 seconds channeling Explosivo and then a couple more seconds channeling Supercharged. He's just going to Let's Go Crazy and start attacking everybody. It'll silence him, he's not casting anymore, and his attack range increases to 8, so he can attack anywhere on the board, no problem. So great change now. This actually makes him a very legitimate, strong carry if you can get him to cast Let's Go Crazy. Firebreak, one of his talents, the damage reduction has increased from 25 up to 45%, and then the feedback loop has been reverted back to its previous, where the supercharged units will gain mana caused by damage from their abilities. Upon casting, they deal damage equal to the mana cost to adjacent enemies. And I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't played enough Hobgen to really assess the impact of these two abilities, these two changes to the talents. They obviously seem, well, at least Firebreak is a straight buff. I'm not entirely sure how Feedback Loop is going to play out. We'll have to see that. I haven't played with enough because I've been one of the people spamming Anessix just the same. But overall, I really like these changes. I was very lukewarm about the changes they made last week and very excited about the changes they made this week. All right, on to the other changes to heroes. They have substantially nerfed Warden, who was by far one of the most prominent units in the game. The clones will now have a minus 50% debuff to their attack damage. Warden clones will now deal half as much damage as the real one, which essentially means that Warden's damage output decreased by 25%. And that's a big hit, especially because the entire purpose of Warden is to deal damage, and now they just cut his damage out by a lot. You probably won't see him splashed in quite as many compositions. He probably will still be okay to play from time to time, but ideally you find some other options instead. Axe, his maximum health has been buffed again to another set of randomly weird numbers. Previously, he was the only one that didn't have like a nice round, 1600. He had 1610 for some reason, 3220 instead of just 3200, and so on. Now he's got 1851, 3703, 4706. I don't know why, but you know what? He's now the only unit in the game who has an odd amount of health, an odd health total. So I guess that's cool. But I still am not enthused with Axe. He's okay, but his Brute and Brawny Alliance are just kind of lackluster at the moment. But there are some changes down below we'll get to in a second. Bloodseeker, armor changed from 5 down to 0. Okay, so they nerfed Bloodseeker. They increased his maximum health by 200, 400, 600 at each respective level. And his Blood Rage effect, instead of reaching the maximum attack speed at 20% health, he now reaches maximum attack speed at 25, 30, or 35. I don't think this helps Bloodseeker. The big problem is that he kills himself too quickly. Gaining maximum health doesn't really help that because he still burns himself for the same amount or the same percentage. His attack speed ramps up a little bit faster, but I don't really care too much about that. I mean, maybe he gets a kill out of it. It's not a big fan of this change. I don't think it really fixes Bloodseeker. I still think he's going to be pretty bad. We just talked about the Hobgen changes. So let's move on to Lifestealer. Lifestealer was probably the kind of underwhelming, I'd say. Like, I thought I had big hopes for him. I had high hopes that we'd get this Heartless, this Brute, and it would be a great pairing to like start a good alliance out of. But he was just underwhelming because his attack speed was too slow. And now we see that his attack rate has substantially increased from 0.58 up to 0.667, and it actually scales up at every level. So the higher, he basically has his attack speed from level 3 at level 1, and then it goes up from there. So that's a good change. They also buffed his lifesteal percentage from 4.56 to 4.56, 7.5. So overall, good buffs to Lifestealer. I liked the concept of Lifestealer. I liked his idea. I liked his alliances. I just didn't like his stats. His stats were just a little bit too low. So were Legion Commanders, but they didn't address Legion Commander here. So maybe we'll see some more Lifestealer builds with some slight stat buffs here. Magnus was also a little bit unimpressive, and he gains some maximum health, and actually made me a little bit of a liar. I said that Axe was the only one who had an odd number of health. Well, now Magnus has an odd number of health, 1875 at 1 star. So there you go. A little bit of health buff, always welcome. I've always liked the idea of Magnus. I just like Cleave as an ability, probably more than I should. But it's good to see Magnus. They're trying to push these brutes back into playability a little bit. All right, now the big one, Pudge. Pudge was by far the most commonly played unit in the last patch. Like, there would be games when he would be played, 6 or 7 or 8 of the 8 players would all have Pudge. His cooldown has been massively increased. His cooldown has changed from 10 seconds across the board, and it goes up to 20 seconds at 1 star, 18 at 2 star, and then 15 at 3 star. It is a big increase in his cooldown. He's going to be casting so many less hooks per fight. He'll still get the first one off. He still has the potential to hook the Underlord, and he still has really good alliances and really good health. So I wouldn't say he's gone or he's dead or he's out of the meta, but I would definitely say that he is weaker. But you're still probably going to play him a lot for a lot of those reasons. He just won't be quite as oppressive. Razor received a rather substantial buff. His minimum damage has increased from 10 to 25, and maximum damage has changed from 50, 100, 150 to 100, 200, 300. Basically doubling the maximum benefit and more than doubling the minimum benefit. So really, Razor's damage just doubled on his ability. That's a pretty big buff to mage compositions, really, that want to get that magic damage out. He's going to be a pretty good damage dealer in the early game because of it. Troll Warlord, another very commonly played unit in the late game. His bonus max attack speed bonus attack speed from the stacks has been cut in half, essentially, from 15 down to 8, 20 down to 10. But the maximum stacks has increased. So now he kind of fills a similar role. He can ramp up to the same amount of damage, or same amount of attack speed. It just takes him longer to do it. Much longer, actually, because he doesn't benefit from the initial attack speed burst. So he'll still be good on long durations on the same target, but this takes him a long time to get up there, and should make him a little bit less oppressive in that late game situation. Viper, the Nether Toxin, damage was doubled again, just similar to Razor, in just an underperforming unit, gets a pretty big damage buff on their ability. The big problem with Viper, though, is that he doesn't really fit into compositions, like from an alliance perspective. So it's hard to see that this is actually going to make a huge difference. It doesn't, put him to the top of the damage charts by any means. It makes him decent, but we'll have to see where he ends up fitting in now that he's got a little bit of a buff. Item changes. Force Staff, the ability from Force Staff is no longer affected by Break, so another nerf to Break, but Force Staff was never really that high of a priority anyway, and I don't think this changes anything. And Helm of the Undying, as before, Break will prevent a unit with Helm of the Undying from entering Undying. Now, if the unit is broken after the Helm activates, they'll become targetable and killable again. Interesting. Okay, so I guess they would just return to like one health when they're in that Undying, and they could be killed. That's interesting. So Break can still kind of counter Helm of the Undying. Nice. They also changed some of the alliances, buffed some of the underperforming ones like Brute. The debuff to enemy attack damage has been changed from 15 to 40%, all the way up to 30 and 70%. That is nearly doubling the effectiveness at both tiers. Man, if you get 4 Brutes, just whoever you attack deals 70% less damage. Basically, Brutes are just unkillable in melee combat now. They can still be killed by ranged units, which is the big downside of Brutes, is that you can't apply the Brute debuff to their backline. So you still would want like some extra armor to protect against that, but man, they can crush some frontliners now. The damage debuff on being applied has been increased from 50 and 100 up to 80 and 150. So pretty good damage increase there. It's still, I don't think it really solves the core problem of brutes, is that most opposing damage dealers are coming from ranged units or from abilities. So I'm not entirely sure how this is going to play out. We did see some buffs to some earlier brutes, Axe, Lifestealer, and Magnus. So it's very possible that they come back into the meta, at least to some extent, but we'll have to see how that plays out. I'm not really convinced this solves the problem, but it does buff them up. Demon, when a demon casts, now only allied demons are silenced. And this may sound like a nerf, but it's actually a buff, because it means no longer are your demons going to be silenced by your opponent's demons. So now the amount of demons that you have and the silencing and all that only matters for your own units. So now demons are much more playable in multiples. You no longer have to worry about, oh, my entire board's going to get silenced because my opponent cast. Now, if your demons are being silenced, it's because of your own demons. And then finally, some well-deserved nerfs to Heartless and Warrior. So it's kind of an indirect nerf to Pudge. Heartless, the armor debuff for enemies has changed from 5, 10, 15 to 3, 10, 15. So that you only get a Blightstone's worth of effect, that 3 armor difference, as opposed to 5 armor difference, which is just really huge at the 2 Heartless. And for Warriors, the armor buff has been reduced from 10 and 20 at 3 and 6 Warriors down to 7 and 20. So it's still just as good if you get up to 6 Warriors, but you really have to commit to get the full benefit out of that. And at just at tier 1 of the Warrior bonus, you just get the new nerfed version of Chainmail. That being said, they're still pretty strong, and that is still a pretty good defensive capability. 7 bonus armor on your frontliners. So I still expect Warriors to be good, but now with some changes to brutes and some nerfs to the individual Warriors, we'll have to see where this all pans out. But I'm excited to explore the new meta, especially excited to explore Hobgen a little bit more now that he's been changed to be, I think, in a much more reasonable spot. And you can certainly see some more builds with Hobgen rather than just all focused on Anessix. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and good luck in your games in this new patch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.